A few months ago, I bought something that changed the way I work in here. Not a table saw, not a new bandsaw, a thicknesser from Bunnings. Before this machine, every project I built started with whatever pre-cut timber I could find at the hardware store. Warped boards, twisted edges, timber that looked fine until I got home, and it turned into a banana overnight. This machine means I can control the timber, not the other way around. And that matters a lot when the project you're building actually has to be perfect. This is Australian gum, eucalyptus, the same tree that gives the bush that silver blue look on a hot afternoon. Cut into it and you find these resin channels running through the grain like veins. Beautiful, and I had no idea what to do with them. So before I did anything else, I called someone who did.
On the woodworking channels.
This is Fingers, one of the biggest Australian woodworking YouTubers. 2 months ago, a video from Fingers popped up on my feed, and I knew straight away that this guy was different. He wasn't just a woodworker, he was a chemist. I could learn from someone with serious skill, and if it all worked, get one step closer to being monetized. So, I sent him an email, and 18 emails later, here we are on a Zoom meeting. In a small project like a jewelry box, would having gum veins running through it wreck the structural integrity? Or should I fill it up with epoxy and stabilize it?
For me, personally, I'd keep them in. When I've made small, non-structural things out of gum that have some of those veins in there, then I like the look of them. Particularly if they're not too chunky, not too broad. I think they add a lot of character. People call them features. Other people call them flaws. An aesthetic choice, it's a hard one.
Being chunky and broad was the perfect description for these gum veins. So I cut them out. Alright, I want to tell you something I haven't said yet. This box isn't for sale. I'm making this for my mum. Her birthday is in 5 days, which means I have 5 days to master cutting dovetails by hand, learning how to book match, and how to use a router for the first time ever. That attachment actually worked better than expected. Now, let's open up my miter saw. Okay, let's talk about the design of this box. My original plan was to buy one on Etsy, not because my mum wasn't special to me, I just wanted to focus all of my time into carving a bowl with a chainsaw on the lathe. So I went online, started looking through Etsy, and there were heaps of really nice options, but none of them felt quite right on their own. It was more like each box had a very strong design feature, but the rest of it didn't quite land. One had this really nice little handle detail on the lid, another had beautiful hand-cut dovetails, but none of them had all these things combined into one box. I started thinking, what if I combined all of the best features into one custom box? So I put the chainsaw project on hold and decided to go all in. The only problem was, by the time I made that decision, I had just 5 days left until her birthday. No pressure. I've got a plan to combine all the interesting features of these 3 boxes into one, but first I have to mill up all the wood and learn how to cut dovetails. Today I want to try and cut all the sides for the jewelry boxes. So I'm going to cut 3 slits out of this piece of wood here, and then I'll cut some more out of this piece here. Do you know how they are formed, the gum vein?
Not really. I'm a chemist, unfortunately, not a biologist. I would just assume they're called gum trees for a reason. I think it's their sap, which the tree pumps around through there, and eucalyptus are famous for them, particularly, Ubicash/Tassie oak. Those sorts of timbers are always going to have them. It's good when they're not there, but you can use them to your advantage if they are.
Thank you. I want to address a couple of things that have come up in the comments from the last video before we get to the test fit, because they're relevant to this build. The shoes. Yes, I know. I got the comments. I got a lot of comments. Many people very kindly pointed out that I was working without proper work boots, and that this was a terrible idea. So here's why I'm not wearing steel cap boots in this video. This footage was filmed before the cutting board video, before the comments about the shoes. So in this video, you're going to see me without work boots. I'm making a video about turning a log of eucalyptus wood into a bowl. To be honest, this is probably the most sketchy thing I've ever done, because it weighs about 14 kilos, and to turn it, I need to spin it at a couple thousand RPM. So even if I hadn't have got those comments in the last video, I would have still been wearing steel caps. Subscribe so you don't miss that video. While I was cutting these sections, my mind kept wandering back to one question I still haven't answered. What actually is this wood? I know it's eucalyptus, I know it's Australian, and I know it's been through some type of trauma in the past based on the vein patterns. But eucalyptus isn't a species. That's like saying it's a tree. There are over 700 species of eucalyptus in Australia. Spotted gum, tallow wood, Sydney blue gum, they all look different. They all work differently and they all have a different story. And I have no idea which one this is. Now, I actually thought I had this one covered. Before this Zoom call, I did some in-depth research into James and found out he was a chemist. And I figured he might be able to take a small sawdust sample of this piece and figure out what strain of eucalyptus it is. So I asked him. So if I really wanted to get the species of wood, could I take a little sawdust sample and send it to a scientist?
So you're talking to my analytical chemistry brain now. No, the best way that you could do to get a reasonable identification on the wood, if you do have a sawmill or a timber merchant, take a piece of it. A timber merchant will be very good at determining what type of wood it is.
Okay, sides are milled, now I need to join them. Original plan was miter joints. Clean 45-degree corners, elegant, simple, and looks great on a box. And if done right, it looks like the grain runs seamlessly around the box, and it gives the illusion the box was carved from one piece of wood. Then I turned the saw on. The blade was pulling the wood in, and every time my hands got slightly pulled into the blade. This was the first time I ever used this saw to cut a 45-degree angle, and it was terrifying. So I stopped, because I somehow still have all 10 of my fingers, and I want to keep it that way. But I just can't seem to cut these miters safely on my miter saw or straight on my bandsaw. So I reached out to a woodworker called Polished Timber, who makes beautiful boxes and clearly knows joinery. And after a pretty long email exchange, he gave me a clean breakdown of how to safely cut miter joints from a long board, but he also gave me another option, cutting dovetails. So I'm going to try and cut dovetails. I've only cut dovetails one time before, when I was taking a woodworking class at school, and that was in 3cm thick pine, so cutting them in hardwood should be a lot of fun. Dovetails were always the right call, not just because they look incredible, though they do, but because of what they actually are mechanically. A dovetail joint is a mechanical interlock. The angled tails make it physically impossible to pull apart from the pins in any direction, so hopefully this box will last for generations. Plus, it'll give it that nice classic look. Okay, it's about 10 at night. I'm gonna go to bed, come back early in the morning, and let's cut some dovetails. I downloaded a free dovetail angle jig from Thingiverse and printed it. I also used Gemini to work out the exact spacing based on the board thickness. These are going to be the pieces of wood with the tails in them, and these longer pieces are going to have the pins in them. I know I said I'd never use AI again, but for this part of the project, it was actually quite useful. The skill in dovetails isn't arithmetic, it's in the marking, the chiseling, the fitting. That's where the craft is. Here is a topic I know is going to create some comments. Marking knife versus pen. The woodworking community, broadly speaking, is very committed to the marking knife. The argument is that the knife gives you a finer, more precise baseline than a pen. The knife actually severs the wood fibers at the shoulder line for your chisel to reference against. The pen just marks the surface. Okay, so I've marked everything out, now it's time to cut the dovetails. So originally I was going to use this saw, but notice how it bends? That's no good. So I went to miter 10 and bought this. It's a tenon saw, so I want to use that to cut out these dovetails. I watched a video from Blacktail Studio, great channel, highly recommend, where Cam was doing exactly this kind of layout work. Slipped and split his finger open with the marking knife on camera. And I watched that video and thought, you know what? The pen is fine. The pen is absolutely fine. The baseline gets scored with a knife, because that line is where the chisel registers. And for that specific purpose, the knife cut does matter. Everything else gets marked with the pen. There were 3 saws on the shelf. The cheapest option, mid-range, and the expensive one. Normally, I go straight for the Craftbrite one. This time, I didn't. I had just got my paycheck, so I figured I'd invest in something better. That actually turned out to be a mistake. The teeth on this thing were aggressive. Way too aggressive for what I was trying to do. Every push into the wood felt like the saw was fighting me, grabbing, tearing, refusing to track cleanly. And that was because the teeth were angled forward. It made me realize pretty quickly why so many people swear by Japanese pull saws. With my coping saw, the teeth face back toward me, just like the Japanese saws, and when I pull, it just glides. there's control there, it feels natural. So I actually ended up just using the coping saw to cut everything. Okay, so I'm cutting the pins now. So what I did is I lined this up on here like that, and I drew lines where these marked on here. I drew lines on both sides, and the parts where I scribbled out, I want to be removing those. I've been trying to figure out the best platform to sell my work. I started with Etsy and then went to eBay, but there's this new platform, well, new to me, called Makerspace, created by Blacktail Studio. It's basically Facebook Marketplace, but only for actual handmade woodworking. No mass-produced Chinese stuff pretending to be handmade, because apparently a lot of Etsy listings are actually from factories, which kind of defeats the purpose. Okay, looks good. Now, it's time to cut the other side out. Let's go. I put a mark on there and on there, so I know this one goes on this one. And I want to put a mark here. Yeah, that's a little simple trick I picked up at high school when I was making a noughts and crosses board. Okay, let's cut the pins out. I underestimated the dovetails. What I thought would be a one-day process turned into 2. Which left me with only a couple of days to finish the box before my mum's birthday. That intense time pressure started to show in my work. On the final section, I rushed to cut and ended up blowing out one of the pins. Not just a small imperfection, but a fairly significant chip that left a noticeable gap. At that point, it wasn't something that I could convincingly hide with a standard sawdust and glue fill. So instead, I shifted to a more mechanical repair. I took a cutoff from the same board, split off a small piece, and carefully worked it into the damaged area. And even though I do say so myself, I think I did a pretty good job. Okay, so I just finished all the sides. Now it's time to make the base. I wanted the lid to be the thing that stands out the most, but I want the base to also look nice. So, I've got a few options. First option is this nice piece of dark wood. The third option is this nice piece of camphor laurel wood. And the fourth option is this nice burl. But out of all these pieces of wood, the piece of wood that I think would look the best on the base is this piece of jacaranda. I think it will contrast quite nicely with this wood. And for the top, I'm going to be using this piece of camphor laurel wood. So let's make the base. This is jacaranda. Native to South America, introduced to Australia about 150 years ago. It's fast growing, soft to medium hardness, slightly brittle, but the grain looks absolutely beautiful. And apart from giving me nosebleeds for a week, it's an amazing wood to use. You might know jacaranda from the purple flowers. Every spring it covers entire streets in purple. Beautiful tree. And turns out, beautiful wood. To get one clean edge, I used a circular saw with a pine offcut as a fence. A poor man's track saw. It's not elegant, it works. One of the commenters from the last video, shout out to Jarrell Thompson, actually suggested a better version of this, using MDF and double-sided tape to make a poor man's track saw. I'm going to try that next time. I ripped the base to width on the miter saw, ran it through the thicknesser to remove the saw marks, and even the thickness out. I would not recommend ever making that cut on a miter saw, but it did a pretty good straight cut. Right now, I'm making boxes and pens, small stuff. But my actual goal, is to build up my woodworking skill level until I'm good enough to start making custom furniture, live edge tables, cabinets, the kind of stuff you see from Bandula Studio or Four Eyes Furniture. I bought this pack of router bits for $20 at Mitre 10. They're craft right, so they're the cheapest of the cheap, but they should work. I put a chamfer bit in and ran it around all 4 edges of the base. The result looked like something you buy. But here's the reality check. If my channel doesn't grow, then I'll probably stop uploading and just focus entirely on building up my skill level. The 100 hours it takes to edit one of these videos is 100 hours I could be using to improve my woodworking skill set. So my plan to grow this channel and my woodworking knowledge as quickly as possible is to collaborate with as many woodworking YouTubers as possible. That's why this was originally going to be a 2-part series. Part 1 was going to be with Fingers to talk about the wood. Then I held it against the dovetailed sides and realised it was too large, about 5mm too wide on each side. Back to the bandsaw, trim both edges, back to the router, re-chamfer, 3 days left. And part 2 would be a collaboration with Dana Made to talk about design, specifically how that influences his palette wood projects and his overall design process. I actually filmed both interviews already, but this video would have only been about 15 minutes long. Since I'm pushing for monetization, a 15-minute video isn't the best way to get 4,000 watch hours up. Don't get me wrong, it would have been great to have a collab with a YouTuber who has over 100,000 subscribers, but I'm never going to upload a video just to get subs. So I've decided I'm going to make one long 30 to 40 minute video instead of two shorter ones. I'm going to save that interview I had with Dana for a different project. By the way, if you want to see the full unfiltered interviews I had with Fingers and Dana made, they will be available on my Patreon. Every member helps me out immensely. Thank you. The glue up is a singular moment where all the patience, the careful measuring, and the quiet hours in the workshop finally accumulate. It's the moment you find out whether the last week of learning how to cut dovetails was truly worth it. All four sides are brought together. There is a deep, tactical satisfaction in watching well-cut dovetails draw the entire assembly tight as you press them home with clamps. Wood is a living material, and sometimes it holds tension. I noticed a microscopic twist in the assembly. One corner rocked just a fraction of a millimeter. To coax it back to true, I brought a clamp straight down, pressing the entire frame perfectly flat across the bench, holding it true just while the glue cured. For the large gap I talked about previously, I glued in the offcut, and man, you wouldn't even be able to tell that I messed this part up. The base is looking absolutely beautiful. Now it's time to move on to the most exciting part of this project, the top, with this piece of camphor laurel wood. So I'm not going to be putting a recess in here, I'm going to be putting a recess in the actual lid. Okay, this is the new base here. I cut this much off, see that? And then now I think that looks better. Do you think that looks good now?
Yes, very good. It's nice.
It's good?
It's very good. I think it's perfect.
Okay. This is camphor laurel. Originally native to East Asia, it's actually considered an invasive species here in Australia. But underneath that reputation, it's a truly beautiful timber. It's got a medium hardness, sitting around 950 on the Jenker scale. Working with camphor is a uniquely sensory experience. As soon as you make that first cut, the workshop fills with this incredible fresh aroma. It's the naturally occurring camphor compound. This is going to look so good when it's all glued together. The exact same one you remember from old medicine cabinets. To bring the two halves together, I flattened the mating edges by running them over a sheet of sandpaper, adhered completely flat to the workbench. If I had a jointer here, I'd probably still be using this technique, as it's a lot safer compared to if I tried to run such a small piece through my jointer. Once the edges were flawless, I brought them together with some polyurethane glue, and then set them gently into the clamps for the night. With the glue cured, I ran the lid cross grain through the thicknesser, taking incredibly light passes, before taking it to the bandsaw to establish its final dimensions. Camphor laurel. It's a favourite for cutting boards. For me, I just love the smell. I actually made a small nightlight out of camphor laurel when I was 12, just so I could keep that scent in my room. To make the most of this striking grain for the lid, I decided to use a technique called book matching. You take the most figured section of the slab, carefully resaw it down the middle, and then open it up, just like a book. To get the lid to drop perfectly into the box and sit flush, I needed to create a precise rebate into the entire perimeter. I established the shoulder cuts using a depth stop on the miter saw, and then cleanly removed the remaining waste with a straight cut bit in the trim router. Looking around the shop, I've only got one day left to bring this all together. It fits in, you can see, very nice. An angle grinder fitted with a metal sanding disc made quick work of the proud end grain at the corners. Then the orbital sander smoothed everything out, blending the joints until the sides felt like a single continuous piece of timber. I tried just using the orbital sander to sand down the end grain, but this gum is so hard, it would have taken hours. So as long as you take really fine cuts with the angle grinder and don't dig in too far to the wood, it can actually turn out really well. It's taking shape. It looks like a box. And I've been watching your channel for a bit now, and I've noticed you use a lot of pallet wood. Why did you decide to use pallet wood and not just wood from the local sawmill?
Firstly, I'm in the middle of the city, so local and sawmill are not two words that unfortunately go together. I'd have to drive out to the outskirts of Sydney to find that sort of stuff. The good part of living in the city is people throw stuff out all the time. So I started using pallets and other reclaimed timber, firstly because it's free, but also because I don't need to be killing new trees when there are plenty of good old trees that have got life left in them, ironically.
Awesome, thank you. For the handle, I wanted to create a focal point that tied the entire piece together. A foundation of gum to echo the sides of the box, a heart of jacaranda to speak to the base, capped once again with gum, a bit like this Etsy listing, which I took a huge amount of inspiration on to build this piece. I glued the stack, clamped it, and let it set solid. To find its final shape, I secured the orbital sander to the vise and brought the wood to the machine. A delicate chamfer routed around the top edge mirrored the profile of the base perfectly. I've also got a video lined up with Jasper Makes, a massive YouTuber with over 350,000 subscribers. In that one, I'm going to try my hand at making an end table using his specialty, pallet woods. And then I'm also going to make one using recycled native Australian hardwood to see which one sells better and generates more profit overall, labour and materials included. And then I'll be donating those profits to charity, so keep an eye out for that one coming up shortly. Then came a moment where I simply ran out of hands. I needed the handle seated perfectly in the centre of the lid, and I couldn't hold it, so I asked my mum for a favour. She came in, held it steady, and went back inside. She had absolutely no idea what she was helping build. With the position marked, a drop of CA glue acted as a temporary instant clamps, while the permanent bond of the polyurethane glue cured safely underneath. This project has really made me fall in love with woodworking. Back when I was woodworking about 5 years ago, I was using like hand saws and chisels. Now I've got a bandsaw, a router, sanders, miter saw. It just makes woodworking so much more fun. There'll be a lot more projects coming soon. So if you want to see more projects just like this one, subscribe. This is the nicest thing I've ever made. Okay, so during my very long email exchange with Fingers, he asked for my address. Now, according to my parents, I'm not really allowed to just hand over my address to people on the internet, even though I trusted James. So I ended up giving him one of my mate's addresses instead. A few weeks later, he hinted at the parcel again on our interview.
Australian hardwoods are vicious, and luckily, if you check your mail in a day or two, you may not need to worry about your Zito circular saw for much longer.
And that made me even more curious. A part of me thought it was going to be a and the other half thought it was going to be some kind of woodworking tool. Well, it finally arrived yesterday, and when I opened it, I was blown away. He actually sent me over a 2,000 watt corded circular saw with a laser. This is something I've wanted for a very long time, but I could never afford it. This is genuinely going to help me out massively with the woodworking and making everything faster and cleaner and safer. So James, if you're watching this, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. One day left. The box is almost done. It just needs finishing. I had an oil-based polyurethane spray. Looked perfect in the can. I figured one night of coats, let it dry overnight, birthday sorted. Then the nozzle clogged. Not a small clog, not a quick fix clog. The kind of clog where you spend nearly 20 minutes trying to clear it, and eventually get it working again. Just long enough to put down 3 more inches of uneven dripping. Absolutely ruined finish. I looked at it for a long time. There was nothing I could do. The polyurethane needed days to cure before I could sand it back. Not hours, days. Mum's birthday was tomorrow. The box wasn't going to make it. Okay, it's the next day. Here's how it's looking. Unfortunately, I now can't use that spray can because it's broken. So my dad's at the local Mitre 10 right now buying some wipe-on water-based satin polyurethane finish and also some beeswax to put over the top of it. Okay, so I've decided to actually let it all sit for about a week in these clamps so the top doesn't warp. You guys start to see the top warping a little bit. Since the spray bottle malfunctioned, it put a really thick layer of polyurethane over it, and it's going to take about a week for it to dry. Okay, new plan. If you watched my last videos, I built a pen holder, a small one, about 3 years ago now for my mum's birthday. But I never finished it because I ran out of time. And ever since then, my mum has been begging me to finish it. So I decided if I can't give her the jewellery box on her birthday, I'll just give her this. So today, it's getting finished. It's not the jewellery box, but it's done. It's finished properly, and it's ready. Now back to the box. The oil-based polyurethane dried for nearly a week. Then I sanded the entire box back to bare wood. Then I went to Mitre 10 and bought a water-based wipe-on polyurethane, which is basically the cheat code for finishing. It's water-based, so it's completely safe, and you can just wipe it on and off. And it only takes about 1 hour to dry. I apply 2 coats with a brush, sanding lightly between coats. Inside and outside, lid, base, handle, everything. And then I finished it all with a coat of furniture beeswax, left it for 30 minutes and then buffed it off. This is it. Hand-cut dovetails in Australian gum, jacaranda base, camphor laurel lid, book-matched layered handle in gum and jacaranda, water-based satin poly, beeswax finish. It took nearly 3 weeks from start to finish. It made me want to give up twice. One joint gave me a week of anxiety. But by the time I actually finished it, it was about 3 weeks since her birthday. So I listed it on my eBay store.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No worries, mate. Yeah, bye.